Welcome everybody, Shiur number 637. We're learning today L'Refuah Shleima Yosef Ben Sima. Getting back to our malacha of TOFAIR sewing. Okay, so we started talking about last time the inyanim of Hamadabek Niyares, if one sticks together papers or skins, but we're going to try and stick to the paper part. Obviously, most of us are not sticking together skins. We said all different types of gluing, taping, pasting, and the like. Okay, and you'd stick together two papers. We said that b'shem the Rambam, it's a shaila of a deraisa. If tearing it apart for a constructive purpose could be a deraisa also. Okay, be it as it may. So what did we say? We said that sticking together these two papers, they become one. So since they become one, it's the same type of an action like TOFAIR sewing, whereby you sew two materials together and they become one. So therefore, the Rambam said, right, one cannot stick together two pieces of paper. And the Mechaber brought it down like that in the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Mem. Okay, so now the question comes up. We spoke about in the past that all the malachas in general, basically almost all, besides koshair sewing, pretty much all the malachas, we said that if it doesn't matter whether it stays for a long time or not, right? We mentioned that if somebody does an action on Shabbos, they bang a nail into the wall, they'll bang a nail, they'll bang a 2x4 into the wall. Fine, I'll keep it there for 20 minutes. Fine, the person was over boina building, right? Or it could be makabe patish, or whatever the case is. He's finishing off a kli, an item. So any type of, pretty much any, or in general, you have koshair writing. A person writes the letter Aleph. Fine, he writes the letter Aleph and base. That's it. Then he leaves. I'll come back in 20 minutes. I'll erase it. The person was over. He was chayav for koshair writing. He wrote two letters, and that's it. It's case closed, right? So in general, the general concept in most malachas in general, once one did it, we don't say, well, it lasted 24 hours, it lasted 20 minutes. It doesn't make a difference. It's done, it's a done deal, the person's chayav, finished. Fine. So, but when it comes to koshair, we saw that there's certain types of knots, it was a machlokes, we saw it has to be a kayomadic thing, lasting more than 24 hours, some said 7 days. Now the question is, do we say such a thing by TOFAIR sewing? So we said, yeah, if somebody takes a needle, they sew 3 stitches, can't do that, shine, and that's it. But is there maybe possibly such a concept whereby we might say that TOFAIR is taka, not a TOFAIR, a sewing action, which is also sewing, and we saw also the Rambam tells us sticking two pieces of paper together. Is there such a concept that we could possibly say whereby it might not be, if it's not kayama and it's not lasting for more than 24 hours, and we have to see exactly what is kayama, different pshatim as to what is kayama, possibly we'll say that the person would not be chayiv and it's not a real TOFAIR. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, goes through a case in Siman Shin Yud Zayin, which Shin Yud Zayin is talking about koshair tying and mater untying. Shin Mem talks about TOFAIR sewing and koshair tearing. And it talks about a famous case, whereby the dry cleaner or the shirt cleaner used to actually tie the collar of the laundry, and they would give it back. So whatever, be it as it may, it's obviously it's way different than what we have today. But the question was, in those days, would one be allowed to on Shabbos open up that knot or detach that string or whatever it was that tied it together? Is that considered a kayamadika thing, whereby we say one cannot do it because it's the person tied it with that it should last? So do we say it's not kayama? Okay, the fact as to what it is exactly, we're not going to get into all the details right now, but the point is being this tying that they did to tie the collar, it's like they finished off the shirt. It was clean during the week. We're talking about during the week. The person picked it up, let's say on Friday, and now they have it on Shabbos. They want to know, could they untie that tying that was done on this collar on the it's called a beis hatzavar. Just real quickly to read the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch again, Siman Shin Yud Zayin Sev Gimel Matirin Beis Hatzavar Mikesher Shekasrei Kaibeis. It would be mutter to open up that knot that's on top of from the cleaner on the collar. Fine. So the Mechaber tells us Sheinoi Kesher Shal Kayama. This is not considered a kesher, a knot of Kayama, and then he says not to be'aval ein poichsin oisem echadesh to miskayim mzakamana from a new shirt. Don't do it. Okay, we're not going to get into that. That's a totally separate issue. Now the question is like this. The Ramah comes along and says, "Afilu kavar niftach," even if it was already opened. Rak shechazar uman. In other words, the professional cleaner came along. Rak shechazar, he came and he cleaned the shirt or whatever the case is. Uksharai, and he tied it. Oy tefarai, or he sewed it together. B'yachad kederech umanim. And he did it in the way that like a professional cleaner. They sew it together up on top. They gave it whatever it was, maybe a couple of stitches. Again, to keep it closed till the person took it home and had to undo it to be able to wear their shirt. This was the type of style how they did the cleaning. Now, the Ramah actually brings a little bit different case in the question of shoes that were again from a shoemaker. Somebody took it from the shoemaker during the week, of course, and they were sewn together by a professional shoemaker. They were clean, and that's the way that they give it back to the customer. This is sort of like the style of the way of the shoemaker in those days, how it was done. Okay, be it as it may, if it was sewn together, says the Ramah, the one would not be allowed to undo that sewing. The ein chilik, even though it was a sewing of that was not considered a kayama dika sewing, like we spoke about by koshair, by knots, you have a question of kayama or not kayama. Over here by TOFAIR, there's no the ein chilik, says the Ramah further. The ein chilik b'tefira shel kayama la eina shel kayama. There's no difference when it comes to sewing. If somebody sewed it with the 3 stitches or with the 2 stitches and the knots at the end, like we spoke about, doesn't matter. Sewing is, it doesn't, there is no such a thing as kayama or not. Fine. Then comes along the Ramah and says, but there is, he brings from the Beis Yosef, from the Rishonim, v'yesh matirim, there are those who matir b'tefira she'ena shel kayama. There are those who matir a sewing, in other words, that one would be allowed to open up a sewing that is not considered kayama. Now we're going to see what type of kayama we're talking about. Chinese just says, don't do it in front of an amaretz. Okay, now just to read the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch Harav. The Shulchan Aruch Harav, again in Siman Shin Yud Zayin, he says over there in Sif Zayin, says like this: V'yesh matirim b'tefira she'ena shel kayama. There are those who matir a sewing that was done she'ena shel kayama, that's not a kayama dika sewing, which again we want to see what that is. L'natek, to open it up, to tear it apart, or whatever the case is, to cut it, whatever. But then says the Shulchan Aruch Harav v'chein ikar. In other words, we said there are those who say no. When it comes to sewing, there's no such a thing as kayama or not. A person is chayiv if they did it the wrong way or the right way, however you want to call it. There's no kayama at all. That doesn't exist. But then there are others who want to say it's actually the Rabbeinu Yoel that's brought in the Beis Yosef that says that no, there is such a thing in TOFAIR also. Just like by sewing, by tying knots, you have a question of kayama or not. In other words, if it's, again, I'm not going to say the word within 24 hours because there's a machlokes between the levush and the taz, which we have to talk about. But if there's such a thing as kayama, that it's a permanent type of a knot or not. So there are those who say, brought down in Beis Yosef, that there is such a thing as a permanent sewing or not also. Whereby if it's not a permanent sewing, even though it was done in what we're going to be talking about, then one would be allowed to open. And it says the Shulchan Aruch Harav v'chein ikar, the mashmois of the Beis Yosef, that this is how we are going to pass. And again, that he says mikol makom ein lahakol b'fnei amaretz, not to do it in front of amaretz. Okay, so we're going to stop here, but just to sum it all up real quickly, it's a little bit complicated because we went through a lot of various different details. It's sort of like we're trying to put together the pieces of the puzzle, as they say. But Lamaisa, making a long story short, what do we have going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Number one, we have that sticking together papers, pasting, gluing, sticking, however you want to talk about, is going into a question of TOFAIR. Right. Okay, so that we understood. Now the question, now we want to know, is there such an issue? Now, we're not talking about now the stitching part and the 3 stitches and the 2. We finished that for now. Right now we're talking about the sticking together papers, whether it's with glue, tape, stickers, whatever the case is. We want to know what's the problem with that. That is also a type of TOFAIR sewing. That is what we're working on now. Fine. Number 2, that's number 1. Number 2, we see in the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Ramah brought it down. Shulchan Aruch Harav tells us that's the ikar, that there is such a concept of whereby there could be a sewing, and it's not, and if it's not kayama, if it's not an established type, a permanent type of a sewing, it would be allowed to be opened. Okay. which would mean, just to sum it all up so we understand where we're going what road we're going down. If I could show you two pieces of paper that were stuck together without a kayama, without a kiyum, without a permanence, then we see that one would be allowed to open that. If we're going to say that it's a tofer she'ena shel kayama, this sticking together of these two pieces of paper or these two skins or whatever the case might be, or these two pieces of plastic, whatever, we stuck it together without a permanence, so we see that there's that one would be allowed to open it up, and that's how we paskin v'cheinik. That's what the Shulchan Aruch Rav told us. The Ramah brought it down. That's what Shulchan Aruch Rav told us. So now next year, Bezras Hashem, we have to work on, in conjunction with these two examples which we spoke about from the dry cleaner, from the shirt launderer or the shoemaker, whereby they sew together the shoes or the shirt, which is not the main thing. We want to get to the TOFAIR, the sewing part, which is actually the sticking together the papers part. We want to see what exactly is considered a kayama in such a situation, which is a machlekes between the levush and the taz, a famous machlekes, which we'll get to. But that's the bottom line for today, that we see by TOFAIR, there are shittas who hold that if there's no kayama, one would be allowed to take it apart, and we're going to try and work with that in conjunction with sticking together papers, sticking stickers. Sometimes people take stickers off of socks, they have new clothing and stuff like that. Possibly a post-it note, a regular sticker. Okay, we're going to go through the various different practical applications as we go down the line. Thank you for listening. Atzlacha and bracha, kol tov.